Hello, welcome to the third video of my Arcane Mage guide for Phase 1. In this video, I'll talk more about mana regen, more about raid comps, and show you a Karazan Prince kill to show you a longer fight than my previous 40-second kills in heroic dungeons. In my last video, I got an angry comment that I didn't show enough math, I just showed actual logs of actual fights. So here's my attempt to give you some math, though I am not a math professor. First thing I will go over is the mana regen equation for TBC at the top. This equation basically shows that Spirit is exponentially better than Intellect when it comes to mana regen because the equation square roots your Intellect value while Spirit is unchanged. Intellect is better for damage, but if you have no mana, you're not going to do much damage. On the far left, I lay out some different levels of Spirit and Intellect a player would have on their gear. An example might be if you're level 60 in Hellfire, you might have 200 Spirit and 450 Intellect without buffs, but my current character, who is semi-geared, is highlighted in blue with around 400 Spirit and 650 Intellect unbuffed. You can see the different in-combat mana regen values in the third column and how it changes with different amounts of stats. You can also compare this to box 2 where I leave Spirit unchanged at 250 for people who are curious to see how foregoing Spirit altogether looks. Next is a box with a list of party buffs and consumes calculated out into an NP5 value based on 3-minute fight intervals. For example, the second line in this box is calculated by getting a single innervate that lasts 20 seconds but is extruded to a 3-minute interval. If the fight only lasted 1 minute, you can multiply this value by 3x, but the other buffs like Mana Spring will always give that amount listed. The fourth box shows what I believe to be the best raid setup is for maximizing an Arcane Mage's DPS. In this raid setup, you would get all the highlighted buffs in box 3 we just covered, resulting in an additional 1300 MP5 based on a 3-minute fight. This is so much mana that you shouldn't go Spirit, and you should just go pure damage, but pretty much no one has a double Shadow Priest with a Boomkin giving them innervates. This is just an ideal setup. The next boxes show how fast this ideal setup would go out of mana. Based on my current gear, if I was put into this setup, I could spam Arcane Blast while using a full DPS rotation of Arcane Power, 2 Icy Veins, and 1 Heroism, and I would last 260 seconds, which is almost 4.5 minutes. I will change around some numbers in a sec to make it a more realistic scenario for most players. The last box is a tier list I made of different specs and classes that you want your raid, with Ellie Shaman and Shadow Priest being S tier. But if you can't get an Ellie Shaman, having a Resto Shaman is good enough for A tier, along with a Ret Paladin with King buff and crit debuff on the boss, Warlock with Curse, Disc Priest for the Spirit buff, and Boomkin for Mark of the Wild and crit buff, and other classes so on down the line. Now to get back to a more realistic scenario, you likely won't have 2 Shadow Priests doing 1k DPS, so we will take those out at 250 MP5 each, reducing us by 500 MP5 down to 800. This is still a good raid setup, but we do lose 2 Shadow Priests, which is by far our best support. To go further, let's reduce it by another 180 to take away the 1 innervate that we are currently receiving. Now we are down to a raid comp most people will be running with. Though my math is averaging out to 3-minute fight intervals, you can roughly spam Arcane Blast for 1 minute 45 seconds, which is almost enough time for the top clears of Prince and roughly the amount time needed for shorter Kara fights. So here I will commentate on my Prince kill that I did yesterday, June 22nd. My raid comp is not terrible, fairly decent. I'm grouped with a Resto Shaman, and I have 2 Pallies in the group, Druid in the group. I don't get an Innervate, I don't have a Shadow Priest, and I don't have a Disc Priest for the Spirit buff. So it definitely could be way better, but the fight's fine. Here at the start, I'm basically spamming Arcane Blast as much as possible, because I want to put my Mana Gem and Mana Potion on cooldown, because I know this fight last week took the guild around 4 minutes to do. And since the fight's over 2 minutes long, I know I'm going to get 2 rotations on my Mana Gem and Mana Potion. One thing I did mess up is, as you can see, I just used my Mana Gem. I did not create a new one before this fight, so I will only be using my Mana Gem once, which is a loss of 2500 mana, which is very costly for me. So here, I'm done with my burn phase. I used my Mana Gem and Mana Potion. Now I'm going to my conservation phase, which is 3 Frostbolts and 3 Arcane Blasts, so that I can still cast my Arcane Blast at a fast speed, but at a reduced mana cost, because the debuff falls off while I cast it. I'm conserving mana right now, even though I have almost full mana, because at 60% we Heroism for phase 2 when the boss does a lot of damage. So I want to have maximum mana for that. Here's phase 2. We Heroism, and then I pop all my cooldowns. Arcane Power and Icy Veins. Now I probably should have conserved a little bit more mana, because I'm about to run and I still have my Icy Veins up, which ideally I would want to cast Arcane Blasts all throughout. But it was fairly close. I had roughly 2.5 seconds left on my Icy Veins when I evocated. Ideally, that would have been half a second left to maximally get out of the Icy Veins. So I Cold Snap and I Icy Veins again. I'm going into a conservation phase until my Mana Gem and Mana Potion come back up, which I don't have a second Mana Gem because I'm stupid, but if I wasn't stupid, I would have it. And an unfortunate thing that happens is my Shaman forgets right now to put down totems. So, very unfortunate, because Resto Shaman, Spell Damage Totem and Mana Regen Totem is roughly like 10% damage, and I'm not going to have it for the last minute of this fight. Fairly unfortunate. So my Mana Gem mistake and my Resto Shaman's mistake is going to cost me a lot of damage here. One last thing I wanted to mention is we 3-healed this fight, so if we had another DPS, the boss probably would have been killed at 3 minutes instead of 3:30. If this was the case, I could have spammed Arcane Blast for a higher percentage of the fight, resulting in a lot more DPS. So I think I finished at 1150 DPS here. All things considered, I probably could have done around 1400, even though I still got a top 10% pars. Thank you all for watching this video. I believe I covered everything that I needed to for Arcane Mages, but if you have any questions, put them in the comments and I'll try to get to them. Thanks.